Joining me today is the founder and director of Turning Point USA, a student organization for young conservatives which advocates for free markets and limited government. Charlie Kirk, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Glad to be here. Big fan. It's great.
Young conservatives. I thought there was no such thing. That was like the Yeti or the Unicorn or Falcor or something.
There's more of us than you might imagine. It's not all conservatives. Some are libertarians, some are free thinkers, independents, people on the center right. We just had that amazing conference that you were nice enough to come down and speak at in Florida. 2,600, 700 students from all 50 states. And it was so funny, I couldn't pay the media outlets to cover this thing. You know, I was calling up the New York Times, Washington Post. Here we had, thousands of students giving up their winter break to come here from, you and me and the best speakers, that advocate for freedom. And none of the media outlets and the traditional media outlets covered it. But it's amazing. There is a revolution happening on these campuses, but it's not against conservatives, all this. It's a new train of thought that we want freedom, we want smaller government, but it's also fighting the culture war, which is for free speech, for diversity of ideas, and really against what these college campuses have created. Yeah,
so you're in the thick of a lot of the things, obviously, that we talk about here. So first, I just want to talk briefly about how we met, because I think it kind of shows sort of how you operate and why Turning Point has taken off. So we had met about a month and a half ago at the Horowitz Freedom Center event in Palm Springs. Were you a panelist there, or were you speaking?
I was a panelist and just kind of helicoptering around of a lot of friends that attend that conference.
Yeah, so you were there and everyone was like, oh, you got to meet Charlie Kirk, you got to meet Charlie Kirk. We met for 2 seconds. You said a couple nice things about me and you're like, we're doing this, our gig in Palm Springs in a couple weeks, why don't you come down and talk? And immediately we worked it out and your guys sent me the paperwork the next day and it was done. And I think that does illustrate something, because we're going to get into some of the issues that we agree on and some of the things we disagree on. But basically you were like, look, you're down for free speech. That's the main thing here. Yeah. And I want my audience to hear you talk about that.
Well, you're a rational thinker, which is really rare to find in California. No, I'm kidding. But no, I mean, I'm a big fan of the show, and I watch a lot of your interviews, and I know you have a huge following amongst young people, and I mean, I met you. I was like, yeah, let's get you on board. I've always been a gut player, for better or for worse. It's got me into a little bit of trouble at times. Yeah. But I think it's been positive. You just have to go with your gut and make quick decisions. And similar, that's where I met Candace Owens too, who's now doing a wonderful job with us. And it took me about 45 seconds until I offered her a job. Yeah. So
literally, I think that it happened right in front of me, and then you walked up to me.
That's right.
Candace was like, I just got a job, and you were like, let me do something with you. And I was just like, all right, look, this guy's obviously open to some different people in the scheme of what's going on.
You need the diversity of ideas, right? If you're in a room where everyone thinks exactly the same, that would be a university. So you need the diversity of ideas, and you need to be able to challenge your viewpoint around a broader theme of freedom. That really is okay to have that sort of discussion.
Yeah, so to illustrate that point, so then about, I think it was the week before Christmas, you guys do this. Was it the largest conservative college group
We're waiting for someone to correct us. We've done some research. We have never found anything even close.
Yeah.
To have 2,650 students from all 50 states. No one's really found anything even comparable of size. So we call it the largest until someone corrects us.
Yeah. Well, you had some protesters out there. They show up all the time to everything. Yeah, but there was true diversity of thought there.
Totally.
I mean, it was also sort of a Rubin Report reunion for me, because Prager was there and Gutfeld was there.
All my best friends.
And Candace was there, obviously, and a whole bunch of other people. Trump Jr. was there, just a series of people. I went up there and I talked about being gay married, and I talked about being pro-choice, and a bunch of other things that if you were to poll the average conservative, that perhaps they're not for. I think gay marriage, maybe it's a little different at this point. But I got a standing ovation, and everywhere that I went,
multiple times.
Yeah, a bunch of times, and everywhere that I went for those 2-3 days that I was there. And by no means was this just me. I mean, Ben Shapiro came out. It was like
Elvis. It was
unbelievable. Yeah, I was going to say it was like the Rolling Stones appeared.
Seriously,
like, it was nuts. But that happened to everybody. I went for breakfast. I need coffee before I talk to people. Yet there's a line of 100 people
waiting. They just
waiting.
start popping up. It's like they start swarming.
Yeah, but that said something to me beyond the politics, that there's something else going on with young people right now, where they actually, as the young people say, they're really woke.
Yes.
to what's happening here.
Well, and it's that diversity of ideas that I think illustrates what makes our organization so unique. So a reporter came up to me, and he was a totally dishonest guy. He's like, well, this feels like a Donald Trump rally. And I said, how could you possibly say that? Sure, we have Trump Jr., we have Gorka. We also have Austin Peterson, who ran for president in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, I love
right?
Austin.
We have Rubin, who is not a leftist anymore, but he's somewhere out there, right? He believes in freedom, right? We have Ben Shapiro, who literally led the Never Trump movement, right? We have a huge diversity of ideas, and each speaker was respected, was given standing ovations, was challenged appropriately. And I think that really says something about this new conservatarian movement that we're helping create, which is we don't have to agree on 100% of conservative dogma. Let's just get the big stuff right, the big stuff. Is America a great country? Yes. Is free enterprise a good thing? Yes. You know, is freedom something that we should really embrace as a general idea? Yes. Is socialism bad? Yes. That's just pretty much the main key points, and the rest of the stuff we can argue and disagree with respectfully.
Yeah. When did you wake up to some of this stuff? Just tell me a little bit about growing up and your situation,
I was
family, politics, that kind of thing.
Crazy kid growing up. Grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Always was a conservative Republican, growing up around a lot of leftists and liberals in my public high school. And I was
How were you young and conservative? Like,
because I loved history, and I was always contrarian, right? So I'd always be challenging my teachers. My parents were generally Republican, right? They weren't, necessarily political, but they were center right. O'Reilly factor watching, Republicans that I always used to say. And then I would always just challenge teachers that would say that, all conservatives want to do is kill poor people and, pollute the environment. The typical talking points, right?
Yeah.
And being the kind of, rebel, I guess you could say, I'd always challenge the teachers and say, well, no, Ronald Reagan lifted more people out of poverty than your crazy social programs at Jimmy Carter. It drove him nuts, and I found enjoyment in it. And, the further down that rabbit hole you get, the more you read Milton Friedman, the more you understand the foundational principles and ideas. At a young age, I just became on fire for politics and for economics. And long story short, I started this organization when I was 18 instead of going to college, and ended up being a wonderful decision and helped really place myself in a movement that was waiting to be grown. And this is something a lot bigger than just politics. This is the fight for the soul of the country, and it has to start on college campuses, and it's really the struggle for our generation. And it's really, if you divide it, it's do we believe America is the greatest country in the history of the world, and do we believe freedom's a good thing, or do we want to go a completely different direction that looks much more like a European socialist democracy that does not honor civil liberties, that does not honor private property, and really deteriorates everything that made America a great place? That's the decision our generation has to make.
It's kind of funny. You're sort of like the non-Silicon Valley version of like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, the guy that didn't go to college, didn't go to college or dropped out of college. But now you're talking to college people. When did you realize that was the place that this battle had to be fought?
Yeah, and the first couple of years of starting Turning Point USA, it started as kind of a generic student organization. But just like any good innovator and entrepreneur, I listened and I learned and I realized there was such frustration amongst self-identified conservative libertarians on campus that were not being properly channeled and organized. They felt as if they were being targeted and that they were being suppressed and their ideas were not being allowed to be heard. And we made a decision at Turning Point after a couple of years is let's not just fight the political war, let's double down and fight the culture war. And that we can be the champions of free speech, and we can be the ambassadors of freedom, where really you see these campuses, I call them islands of totalitarianism. Their idea of diversity is a group of people that all look different, but they think the same. Yeah. That's not diversity. And so Turning Point has benefited tremendously over the last couple of years of really being the champions of free speech, and also saying, hey, we're not Republicans, we're not conservatives, we're not libertarians, you can call us all that stuff, that's fine. We have members that are across that whole spectrum. As long as you believe in freedom, you believe America's a great country, welcome aboard.
Do you think the idea of having that kind of wide tent is part of the appeal? Like, I think people are so sick of the labels and all that.
Totally.
That it was cool. I spent actually most of the weekend hanging out with Austin, but part of it also hanging out with Tommy and Candace and a whole bunch of other people. And I was like, there really is. And then Allison Stuckey was there and a couple other people. And I was like, wow, these people actually really do think different things.
Totally.
And my libertarian side usually goes to kind of where Austin's at, but I was like, we were all having dinner after and
But
having
that's a
drinks.
great thing, though.
And I was like, this is great. We're having real discussions
Yes.
about, we're really digging into this stuff.
And there is that disagreement, but if you put them all in a room, they get the big stuff right.
Yeah.
Right? You know, do we believe that free enterprise has been a net positive for humanity? Do we believe the Constitution's a great political document that should be preserved, protected, and better understood? Do we believe America has been a wonderful, net benefit for humanity, over the last 200 years? They probably agree wholeheartedly on all that. It's the other stuff where they start to have a little philosophical differences. But that disagreement is not being found on the left right now.
Yeah.
If you disagree with one core tenet of leftist dogma, you're ostracized, you're kicked out. And that shows they're not a diverse political movement, the new modern American left. They're extremely intolerant of differing opinions, and I don't have to talk for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just let you take the stage
now you're acting as my agent. But listen, I would gladly, I said this when I had Shapiro on last week, I will gladly give the exact same speech that I gave to you guys a couple weeks ago. I would love to give that exact same speech to any progressive or Democratic
And you got a
organization.
standing ovation.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get
with
invited.
MAGA hat wearing students, right?
Yeah, it
and
was
that's
bananas.
but you give that speech to the Young Democrat Socialists of America conference coming up in a couple months. You'll get boos and you'll get, we shouldn't hear things we disagree with.
Yeah.
Bolshevik, forever. It's these people have translated into total authoritarianism.
Do you see a moment where both of the movements, where you would argue the conservatives sort of lost their place, thus lost the culture war, and where the left sort of went bananas?
I think the left has gone bananas just by default of their positions. They really, inside of every leftist is a totalitarian waiting to, screaming to get out, is a great quote I always use.
Yeah.
Is because when you argue for total government power and total government control of healthcare and schools and private economic decisions, that can easily be translated into the monitorance of personal capacity decisions, right? That translation is quite simple. And I always say to a leftist that says, well, I believe in, civil liberties, but I also believe in government-run schools and healthcare. And this I say, if you don't trust the government to help, to monitor your own personal life, why on earth would you trust the government to run all these other institutions? Where I think conservatives have gotten it wrong over the last 30 years is where conservatives have become mislabeled, and sometimes some conservatives believe this, to want to do social engineering. Mm-hmm. I think I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm a pro-life conservative, but I also believe government should have barriers in trying to instill those values upon society. I think the best persuasion and the best capacity for good is done through churches and local community movements and individuals persuading individuals and writing books and doing podcasts, not through government doing massive social engineering programs. Yeah. So I think that's where conservatives have lost their way, and that's where the left is currently trying to stake their claim.
Is there anything that you think government does well?
No. I think government is a necessary evil. I think it's necessary for providing for the national defense, because that is something that, whether we like it or not, you have to delegate some of our personal freedom to, have some sort of a civil society. But government, by its essence, if you read what Milton Friedman has said, they're incentivized to be inefficient. Mm-hmm. They're incentivized by definition to not be able to provide the best possible good or service for the individual. So look, the private sector does everything better, whether it be the inefficiency of the post office, or Medicare is bankrupt, Social Security doesn't serve the people, effectively everything government touches goes to crap. And the private sector is by definition more efficient, because if you don't do it well, you're not going to exist much longer.
What do you think is the best way of getting that message across, that government just doesn't do things well? Because I think it's just so built into people, partly because our education system screwed up or whatever, that they just feel the government should just do things. So I saw Bernie tweeted the other day this video of all these millionaires saying
and
that
I responded to that.
Yeah, so I retweeted it, which got like 20,000 retweets, because it was like, it's all these millionaires saying we should be taxed more, we should be taxed more. Well,
what intellectual hypocrisy.
It's such lies. It's like, well, A, what's stopping you from paying
That's what I said.
employees
Just
more?
send more money to the IRS, numbskull.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's like, but yet Bernie's tweet gets something like 50,000 retweets, and not that it's all about retweets and all that.
No, but it's true. He has high engagement with this.
But to me, it's just
nonsense.
lazy thinking. It
is lazy thinking.
This is so virtuous. If it's so virtuous to keep giving money to the government,
that's right.
Why do you need the government to tell you to do it?
And really, at its core, if you look at the philosophical difference between really the culturally Marxist left, which is what they're becoming, and the free-thinking, individualistic, individual libertarian conservative right, which is the new, intellectual position that is growing, quicker than even the left. It's we might want good things to happen in society, but don't tell me to do them at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And the left, on the other hand, I don't think their intentions are very good. I think they want permanent political power. But Bernie Sanders, for example, he is so convicted that he is right, he wants to use the absolute authority and unlimited power of the state to put a gun to your head and say you have to have a 70% tax rate because someone is starving on the street. I would rather live in a society that has the same tax rate for everyone, 10%, and we dig deep. We say, are we going to take care of that person on the street through charity, through private philanthropy, and through being better people? And if you look at when socialism is implemented, you see the moral disintegration of society. You look at Spain, you look at France, you look at Europe. They don't have anything as private philanthropy anymore. Private charity has disappeared in Europe because government takes care of it. And that, I think that is such an important point to make. So going back to your question, how do you illustrate this to a young person? You ask the fundamental question, do you trust the government? That word trust is so important because in that word trust, it really feels personal, right? Do you trust the government? 99% of young people will say no. Then you ask the next question, then why do you want to make government bigger? And then they'll say, I don't. Well, then you're not a socialist, you're not a leftist. Then let's talk about how we can really shrink the size of government and put power back into the hands of people. And it's important to note also, even though you think government might want to do something, it doesn't mean federal government has to do it. Local government is much more accountable to the citizens than some bureaucrat in DC that you're never going to meet. And so those are arguments that we found to be very effective.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned intentions, and I always try my best not to impugn intentions of others. I think that, especially on the left right now, obviously, I think these people have a lot of bad ideas. Now, of course, some of them have bad intentions, but most of them don't. Most average people don't wake up thinking, I'm going to do bad today. They actually think they're doing good.
Most of them, yeah.
Do you think some of their leaders actually have bad intentions?
Without a doubt, yes, absolutely. Not all of them, but some of them. And you look back to the original writings and the original thought process behind the Great Society, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who bragged on multiple times that the implementation of the Great Society and all the social programs around it will keep African Americans dependent and keep them voting for generations. Documented in the presidential record, Lyndon Baines Johnson said that. And so I think the Democratic Party is full of people with great intentions, but its leaders have realized and calculated that if they can keep the government programs continuing for just long enough, not getting people out of poverty, but keep people surviving within poverty, they will have a permanent political base. So if you ask the question, if African Americans actually rose out of poverty and saw their wages get higher and their schools get better and their communities flourish, are they going to keep voting for government welfare programs that are the basis of the Democratic Party? Absolutely not. Yeah. They're not. They're going to break out of that. So I think the intentions of the Democratic Party, the followers, I'm never ever going to impugn them. I'm not going to call them deplorables or anything like they call us. Right. I think most of the followers of the Democratic Party are actually really good people. But the leaders, we must question their motives, because if you look at the failures of the welfare system in this country, it is undoubtable that they're protecting a system that benefits them politically.
Is this also partly why the media is going so hysterical right now? Like, have you noticed just in the last couple of weeks, we've shifted a little bit out of Russia hysteria, but now it's about Trump's mental capacity, and it's like you can see how they coordinate it. I mean, you really, if you just look,
I'm telling you, they got like a group text message chain going. I'm telling you, they got like John King, Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon, Rachel Maddow. I think they're all just group texting. I'm not kidding. I want in on that.
How far down that conspiracy theory can you go?
I mean, when you start to have all three television stations open, of CBS This Morning and CNN, with Cuomo, and MSNBC with Morning Joe, and they're talking about the exact same thing. Literally, the segments are literally produced the same. I don't think that's a conspiracy. There's got to be some sort of talking points memo they send out early in the morning.
But does that show you a talking points memo or just general groupthink?
No, I think it's general groupthink, but I think they understand that they have to be coordinated to be effective, which there's nothing, I think, wrong with that effectively. We conservatives do the same thing without even realizing it. You listen to Rush Limbaugh, you listen to Dennis Prager, and you listen to Sean Hannity, the talking points are usually quite similar, because you watch Fox and Friends in the morning, that kind of sets the agenda. And I'm not attacking the Democrats for being that, but if you look at why the media is going so far off the rails, they will never accept the fact that this presidency is actually large in part a wonderful success. Is that the president is fulfilling his campaign promises. We're seeing unprecedented economic prosperity, and you're seeing people's lives actually get better. And so they have to go down to this tabloid journalism and report on this fake book. They have to continue down this Russia hysteria, because if this president succeeds, which he is, and he will, what else do they have? They have gone so far all in that this guy is a psychopathic nut job they will lose all institutional credibility and political relevance.
You know, it's funny, right when Trump started the campaign, I kept saying that if you keep calling this guy Hitler, you are painting yourself into a really bad corner.
Well, and it cheapens Hitler, too.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Hitler was one of the worst mass murderers in human history who killed 15 million people. And they have people once a week on those networks equate him to the rise of the Third Reich. What does that do? Is it cheapens the evil of Hitler. And isn't that one of the worst things you could possibly do when we're trying to educate the next generation? If everyone's Hitler, no one's Hitler. Then maybe what Hitler did wasn't that bad. Maybe Hitler was democratically elected and had a Supreme Court that kept him in balance. You see what I'm saying? That,
right.
You know, it cheapens the evil of the Nazi Empire when they start to make these comparisons to Donald Trump and Hitler. It's really...
And also the way this stuff just goes downstream. I mean, because then you start calling all your intellectual opponents Nazis, then you say it's okay to punch Nazis. Well, where does that end? Can we punch the Nazi's wife? Can we blow up their car?
Yeah, exactly. I'm called a Nazi all the time. Yeah. And I mean, it's one of the most intellectually just dangerous arguments to make when everyone becomes a fascist, even though there is no evidence of that. What really has your political movement become?
Yeah. Where'd the words freedom and liberty and the words that I now use a lot, how did they get so mucked up that they started feeling wrong? You know what I mean? In the cultural relevance of things.
Well, I think it's starting with the misrepresentation of what freedom and liberty really is. I mean, the left tries to be the movement of freedom. A lot of young people that follow Bernie Sanders actually think they're on the side of freedom. They think that Bernie Sanders is fighting for political freedom and economic freedom and that he's going to fight for the little guy, when in reality, when his ideas are implemented, which he's an open socialist, the power always gets concentrated at the top. The rulers are the ones that get rich. The people that have the best connections, the best lobbyists, are the ones that benefit tremendously. You look no further than Venezuela or Cuba or anywhere where socialism is tried. It's the poor people that voted these guys into power that are worst off. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be able to make the argument, freedom is not only a really cool thing. Freedom is not only a great idea, but it actually works. Like, freedom, when implemented, actually makes people's lives better. Freedom would be a difficult argument if it was not only like really cool to make the argument like, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it. That would be great.
Yeah.
But we actually get to make the argument that in practicality, freedom is the greatest thing to make people's lives better. For innovations, for medical advances, for technological, prosperity, nothing comes even close to allowing freedom to ensue.
So what do you say when someone says, I hear this all the time, well, if the government doesn't do these things, these social programs, or if the government takes away food stamps or whatever it is, that we just don't know if the private sector or churches and synagogues, whatever else, we just don't know that that'll pick up the slack. And then if that doesn't happen, we end up with this permanent class of economically underserved people that have no way of getting out of it.
So fundamentally disagree with that. And so this is where the worldviews, I think, collide, is where the left, they try to build this, I think a lot of it is trying for guilt, right? They actually want to help as many people as possible. They feel so bad that people are suffering. They want someone else to do it for them. So the first thing I do is I challenge them. How much money are you giving to charity? How much are you doing to actually help the homeless guy in the side corner? Yeah. And then what if 10 million people did what you did? Secondly, never underestimate the good that Americans will do when people are in need. Hurricanes, natural disasters, famines, fires. Americans always step up. Americans voluntarily gave $500 billion away to charity last year. Imagine if our tax rate was 10%. Imagine if there was really a national rallying call to double our charitable efforts. We can easily give away trillions of dollars. Wow, trillions of dollars. That's the size of the welfare state. And I would make a compelling argument that local churches, charities, and municipalities do a heck of a lot better job of serving the people than a federal government bureaucrat. A lot better. Yeah. Sending money to Washington, D.C., is that actually going to help the poor single mother in Miami? Or is going to the local Catholic church and giving $5,000, which might be a lot of money to you, actually going to help them a lot more than sending that $5,000 to Washington, D.C.? I will argue fiercely against someone who says that a government bureaucrat is going to help an underprivileged individual better than a private charity or individuals helping individuals.
So you said a couple nice things about Trump. So I want to get into some of the specifics on that.
Please.
But so one of the things that I've said is that Trump basically was the bull in the china shop, and he just went in and just upended everything. And I actually think that right now that's a net good, because there were a lot of bad things happening before, and there's some fertile ground for good ideas. So on that, level, I'm for what's happening. When I had Eric Weinstein sitting in that chair, he said that he would have preferred it to be a panther in a china shop, meaning it would have just knocked over a few things, maybe not the whole thing. I don't think that exists. That was the point of our disagreement. I just think it just doesn't exist where you get to selectively choose which things are going to be knocked off the shelves and all that. Seb Gorka was speaking at the Turning Point event. Gorka. He really, Gutfeld was doing this whole thing about how he sounds like.
Trust me, he was doing it backstage and he continued on stage. Just didn't stop.
But Gorka was saying how Trump was I think he said the icebreaker going through the glacier, basically. And what I noticed, though, is there was a theme with the speakers where everyone basically acknowledged that there are issues with Trump. I don't think anyone went up there and said this guy is the perfect thing, or this is exactly how we wanted it. But there was a sense of this was the only way it could have happened. Is that basically where you fall?
So I'm one of the few, outward and vocal millennial Trump, supporters out there. Not few, I should say, in kind of this world of conservative punditry, if you will. Everyone tries to hedge, right? And there's some good and some bad, and I've obviously gone all in. And I'm glad I have, and I'm happy to walk through, the philosophical, reasoning for that. So look. Donald Trump was never supposed to be president of the United States. Just going back a little bit, running in a crowded field of Republican candidates, announcing the day after Jeb Bush announced his candidacy, which I think was no coincidence. And I think he saw Jeb Bush announce, like, screw it, if that guy's running, I'm running. Took down the Bush dynasty that had $110 million to spend, and then took down the Clinton dynasty, took down the media dynasty in a way that's totally unprecedented. And if you look at the values that he represents, in my personal opinion, he is one of the best chances Western civilization has to continue. He believes America is the greatest country in the history of the world. He's been a fierce critic of socialism. His visit to Poland was a 40-minute critique of the fall of the USSR. He believes that the Constitution's the greatest political document ever written. Look no further than his appointment of Gorsuch and these circuit court judges. But more than any of that, he believes that America as an idea must be preserved, protected, and advanced. And is he an imperfect vessel? Of course, we're all imperfect vessels. Does he tweet things that I might not always agree with? Yeah, sure. But the ideas that he's implementing, I would make a compelling argument. He's the most conservative president in 100 years, even more so than Ronald Reagan. He is doing more bold reforms, and he's fighting to do what he said he was going to do, even in the face of unprecedented opposition, whether it be the embassy moving to Jerusalem, opening up our natural resources, getting out of TPP, getting out of the Paris Climate Accord agreement. This is stuff that is not supposed to happen, right? Do you think Jeb Bush would be doing this? I mean, give me a break. No way.
So basically, do you think he was the last chance for conservatives?
I hesitate to say that, but
I kind of think that's a compelling argument. That if you look when McCain ran or Romney ran, Romney was against women with his binders of women. They said McCain was racist, blah blah blah. That to me, the most compelling argument is that none of these guys. You think Marco Rubio would have somehow beat Hillary?
I know.
Or Jeb would have somehow beat Hillary?
No.
So that, putting aside some of my reservations for a moment, this was the only way that any of these ideas were going to get through.
That's correct. So we play out the alternative scenario. Hillary Clinton is president, and she has control of the Senate and control of the House, and she's just advancing this radically destructive Obama agenda. Instead, Donald Trump, for any of the disagreements people might have around him, the results really speak for themselves. The economic prosperity that we're seeing right now, the $6 trillion of new wealth created in this country. But even more than that, I'm telling you, there was a referendum on the ballot. And I was there in Wisconsin, I was there in Michigan, I was there in Pennsylvania with Donald Trump Jr. for weeks on end. The people that showed up to vote that hadn't voted in 30 years, do you know what they were really voting for? They were voting that America is the greatest country in the history of the world, and here's finally someone who's going to fiercely defend it against the permanent political class. That's important. Because who else to represent that permanent political class than Hillary Clinton? Like, she was the worst person the Democrats could have put up in a change election. Here's someone whose husband was impeached, who constantly cheated on her. She's the most uncharismatic possible person to put up, and here's a guy who, you know what? He's going to blow it up. Great. That's who I'm going to vote for. And you look at a lot of what he's doing. He has shrunk the size of a lot of these federal bureaucracies, and he's fighting a lot of these entrenched media and political establishments that, honestly, I never thought we would see such a champion against, which brings me great satisfaction.
What do you think about the intellectual side of Trump? Like, I get what you're saying, that the broad ideas of freedom and America and liberty and those things. And I basically agree that he does understand those things. In terms of just like the intellectual or philosophical side, do you think he really has an understanding of the issues, or do you think that maybe isn't even important?
I don't think it's that important. I've spent considerable time with him and his family, and I can say this: his understanding of why America is the greatest country in the history of the world, why free enterprise matters, and actually how to benefit country as a whole is just as good, if not better, than some of these politicians that might be able to recite all these intellectual and philosophical quotes. Because this is a president that, you know what, he's been through bankruptcy trials. He's been through hiring and firing hundreds of people. And you running a business and me running a business, that develops character in someone. You just got to say, making payroll, dealing with regulators, versus some of these senators that have been, orators and thinkers their whole life. Give me a break, right?
Yeah.
So I have a deep amount of respect. It doesn't bother me that, CNN says, oh, he talks at a 4th grade level. Give me a break. Seriously. He talks the way that the guy in Northeast Iowa has been waiting for someone to talk to in a while. So I completely dismiss that as an argument, and I look at what he's accomplished as a person, which is totally amazing, and what he's fighting for every single day, and he gets the big stuff correct. He really does. And I challenge some of my critics on the right. Who else in that field of 17 Republican candidates would have nominated Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, moved the embassy, advocated for the greatest middle-class tax cut in American history, not back down on some of these core issues? It's really, if I would have said, here's XYZ candidate, let's just pretend this is, in the Republican primary, and in the first 11 months we'd get this done, most conservative pundits would say, where do I sign? Seriously,
Yeah.
And he has advanced more conservative, pro-freedom, libertarian ideas than any of these candidates, most of these candidates would have.
So then what do you make of the conservative class that hates him? So I'm talking about like the David Frum crew, that whole French, the rest of these guys that really just hate him, even though I agree he has put forth a lot of the ideas that they've been yammering about for the last 20 years.
I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for those publications because of their history. I'm challenged. I'm really wondering, is it a personal vendetta they have against this guy? Is it a personality disagreement? Because policy-wise and implementation of the people he's put in place to make decisions at the cabinet positions, I mean, this is a much more conservative president than George W. Bush and remarkably more effective than H.W. and already in 12 months much more consequential than Ronald Reagan. And so I'm wondering, the ball's in their court, right? Because to be so hypercritical just automatically against someone who is fighting for your ideas every single day, I'm really wondering, is it a personality disagreement, or is it kind of just I don't want to be wrong type of thing? Like I'm cheering for his demise because I've opposed him for so long.
I think it's also I just want to be liked by mainstream. Like
which is the other thing, right? Like I've now created a whole new form of enemies I never thought possible, which is like these rabid,
welcome to my world.
Seriously, like these rabid media elites that are like, oh, he's close to the Trump people, we must try to destroy him. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever, And the hatred for this man is uncalled for.
Is there anything that he's doing that you're not happy with? So I'll give you something.
So that's a great question.
So I'll give you something that just in the last 10
I
days.
think you know what you're going to say, and I'll probably agree with you.
Okay, so in the last 10 days, so he basically instructed Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General.
We were going to agree on that. Okay, fine.
So to me, states' rights, if you care about that Constitution that you said he loves so much and all of those things, the states should be able to make laws that they want, and the federal government should not impede on those laws.
Agree.
We have something called the 10th Amendment, et cetera, et cetera. So in a case like this, what's happening there? How is there such a disconnect between the ideas of freedom that you have laid out so eloquently and then what Sessions is doing in practice?
I can't explain it well, and I won't defend it because I don't agree with it. Look, I'm a big defender of individual freedom and liberty, and I get a lot of hate from my socialist conservative friends when I argue for decriminalization of drugs. I've never done drugs in my life, and I don't plan to, but if someone wants to do it, cool, right? Whatever. Put whatever you want to put in your body as long as it doesn't harm someone else. So this is something that I think they're actually not making the correct decision on. But you know what? I'm happy to say it. I've said it publicly. And, if I find someone like Jeff Sessions who gets most of the stuff right, he's been great on guns, he's been great on some of this other stuff, but I don't think he's correct on this marijuana issue, and I don't think he's correct politically. It's just the majority of Americans don't agree on this issue, and to go after people that are peacefully doing business, that's really what they're going after, is the financial transaction side. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's not on the correct side of economic freedom, but you know what? Disagreement is a healthy thing. Right? And we need to challenge our cabinet officials and challenge our leaders when we don't see eye to eye with them. And I think this is something that I think runs in the face of some of our core beliefs and tenets.
Yeah, it just seems like so ideologically inconsistent to me.
I think
you've been fighting for states' rights. He's been fighting for states' rights. Look, even now you've got people on the left fighting for states'
which
rights,
is just ridiculous.
Which makes no sense because now they're trying to defend sanctuary cities. So now they're for states' rights and against the federal government, right?
It doesn't make any sense. But I will say this: I think a lot of it is stemmed from this kind of old holdover war on drugs that Ronald Reagan declared in the 1980s, which was an abysmal and total failure. Right, the statistics speak for themselves that the war on recreational marijuana has not been a net benefit for the taxpayer or for society in general. Again, I come from the general worldview that the greatest change does not come through government policy or through government bureaucrats. And so to be intellectually consistent, I won't defend penalizing people that are peacefully selling cannabis to other people, whether it be for medically or recreationally. But here's the thing. I went to high school in northwest suburbs of Chicago. This is the story I always tell. People say, Charlie, you're a conservative. How can you possibly hold this position? It's always at these Tea Party groups, which I love. I love the Tea Party. I love these people, right? But they're my, I call them like the hardcore group, right? Like they're the Alex Jones, flag carrying people that are really hardcore. They're really big in the conspiracy, and they're always asking me, Charlie, how can you possibly be on the side of decriminalization of marijuana? I said, listen, I went to high school in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Okay, I remember after football games, like kids had backpacks full of marijuana. Mm-hmm. Now, marijuana is illegal in Illinois. Marijuana is illegal in Cook County, and there were cops in our halls looking for it all the time. It was not working, okay? It's like, let's just put it that way. The kids who wanted it found it. The kids like me who didn't want anything to do with it just walked away. What other better illustration of freedom than that? You don't want to engage with it, just walk away. Yeah. Find somewhere else to do it. We didn't need to pay the DEA or FBI units to go do locker room raids of something that kids were recreationally and peacefully doing. I'm not a proponent of it. I would support a charity to try to educate students not to do it because I think it had a net negative. But why is it government's role to socially engineer us, especially when it's a non-lethal substance?
I always think it's so interesting. Like, look, I'm in California where it's now recreationally legal. But I have a medical marijuana card. Got to hurt my knee playing basketball a couple of years ago. The place is right over there. I'd like to walk you in there just to see what's going on.
I've been in them before. Look, you're not going to persuade me to do it, but I think
I'm not going to try.
I think it's fine. Like whatever.
I just think it would be fun to go in there with you and
that would be
see what was going on in there.
I wear my MAGA hat too.
But that would not go well in LA.
No.
Let's not. I don't need to get a hate crime going here. But I think it's funny because anytime that I ever bought weed illegally, like when I lived in New York City. I just get it from whoever the weed guy was. I don't even know who the weed guy was.
Yeah, exactly.
But I never once, in 15 years or whatever, I never had the guy selling weed say, hey, you want to buy crack? You want to buy coke? You want to buy meth? And yet, we can go to prescription place. You can go to a psychiatrist who will push every drug.
And it's 100 times worse, and it's chemically addictive.
Yeah.
Right? So look, I know plenty of people that have had stories that tell me, Charlie, if it wasn't for medicinal marijuana, I would have gone to narco substances and I would have been in a worse place, right? And so, fine. But that's the core tenet of freedom. And I think what you're seeing here is most of our Turning Point followers would find sympathy with my argument. And this is okay. This is a natural change in a political movement as time goes on. But and the fact that Jeff Sessions holds that position, maybe he has an experience that I haven't experienced, right? That is really personal to him. Maybe he's seen, marijuana do something horrible to a family member or people in local community in Alabama. I'll disagree with that.
Yeah, probably not.
But you say, like, whatever. I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt because I think he's generally a good person. I always try to give the benefit of the doubt when people hold these positions. I just think it's not the right policy. But you know what? In 20 years, you're going to see the conservative libertarian majority, similar to Rand Paul, advocate for this. And then we'll be able to point out the hypocrisy of the left, say, okay, hold on a second. Like, we're cool with people being able to sell what they want to sell as long as it doesn't harm someone else. Why are you trying to tell me I can't frack this oil field in the Permian Basin? Right?
If you want to have like an intellectual,
if you want to be intellectually consistent, right?
Yeah. All right, I want to do one other thing on the social stuff, and then we'll move over to some other things.
I'm cool with,
So, no, I know. I said, listen, I never tell my guests questions, but you immediately sat down. You're like, anything, let's go. All right.
Seriously, challenge me.
Here we are. So, well, I don't think this one will be too much of a challenge, but I think it's an interesting, it just shows how things have shifted. So at the Republican convention, Peter Thiel, an openly gay man, spoke before Trump. He said, I'm a proud gay man, got a standing ovation. Then Trump gets up there, talks about...
And points him out.
Yeah, points him out.
And he said, it makes me very happy, was the exact quote he said.
Because he has a little bit of a little gay, that thing with the hand. But okay, but the fact that there's been such a wholesale shift in that even right now, Ted Cruz or the guys that you might consider a little more of the Christian conservatives...
Which I'm one of them,
Mike Huckabee, right. Okay, so where you come from, basically, as far as I can tell, don't really see this as an issue anymore. Is that a fair premise?
I think that's
to
correct.
start?
And so let me dive deeper and also pose a hypothetical to some of the leftists watching this. Peter Thiel, openly gay man, gets a standing ovation at the Republican National Convention and then pointed out by the candidate. Do you think that an evangelical pastor that was pro-Israel, that might be a Democrat, would have even been allowed to speak at the Democratic National Convention or given a standing ovation? They booed God when that was mentioned. Okay,
no, they literally did.
What is the shift here? The shift is the Republican Party is beginning to realize, hey, we're the party of freedom. Like, it's cool if you want to do that. And I think it's a real sea change, because even if you see Rand Paul beginning to endorse more of those favorable drug policy positions on the side of freedom or gay marriage, you're starting to see a sea change where it's becoming the soul searching the Republican Party has been doing over the last 30 years is, what's the one thing that ties our party together? Freedom, freedom, freedom. And I think that's why you're starting to see that. And the left, they can't reconcile. What ties them together? Oppression. Like, it's the oppression Olympics. It's like, who suffers more? And I think that's a really good thing. Segue to one final point is, what I think is the position that needs to be articulated better is, I have no problem if, gay marriage, whatever, like, I believe marriage, one man, one woman, that's my own personal position, right? But I'm never going to tell government to have someone live a life. I think it's cool you're married, I think it's great, and you should have all the same tax benefits, adopt children, it's great, right? But
I feel the same way about you.
Well, it's fine, it's like, whatever, but that's more of like a generational perspective. Here's where I think conservatives need to really fight hard, and I think you agree, is the religious liberty stuff. Is, are you going to force a Christian baker to make a cake for a gay couple? That is not the same thing as being cool with gay marriage. And the left is trying to make a moral equivalency argument of the civil rights of the 1960s and someone having to violate their religious conscience to make a cake for a gay couple because they want to have fascism where you can go into a private company and say you have to produce a product or service because we have a certain, lifestyle. That's dangerous and wrong, and I think that's where the fight needs to happen, and that's where I think we can actually win converts over.
Do you think also that technology is the answer to some of those problems?
Oh, totally.
Where it kind of sucks. I did in my PragerU video from last year.
Which was excellent, by the way.
Thanks. That was the line that really caught on, because I don't want to force that baker to do something. Just as if there was we could use any example here, but if there was a Jewish artist who had a website that they take commissions for paintings, I wouldn't want the government forcing them to paint neo-Nazi paintings.
It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And would you want to force, a Muslim wedding hall to have to host, someone that is a great critic of Islam, right? That would violate one of the tenets, one of the pillars of Islam, right? Yeah. But for whatever reason, the left is, way overstepping their bounds, and the Circuit Court of California has lost their freaking mind, seriously, where they don't realize the slippery slope that they're engaging in here, where if you have a private business with their own private conscience, they should be allowed to accept and deny business as they see fit, especially if it's business that takes pre-planning, such as a wedding cake or photography. The only argument they might make is if you're, running a fast food restaurant. But you know what? If someone wants to be a racist or a bigot, they have that right. No one's going to go buy products from them anymore, right? That's how you win arguments without having to use the government gun on people's heads. Which, again, I think that's the argument that we have to make. But if a gay couple wants to get married, that's cool. Whatever. That's the law of the land. Move on to bigger battles like religious liberty and freedom.